And I'm going to start recording, and then I'm going to go to share screen. And then I'm going to go to show. And there we go. All right. So can most everybody see that?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Well, believe it or not, it is September. So welcome to the September gathering here of the Camera Club of Brevard. Gonna have a little bit of review on some of the Water Everywhere virtual photo walks that Chuck always manages. I hear some feedback out there. So if somebody's got an audio that's delayed a little bit, if they could just mute themselves, that would be great. Here's some of our Water Everywhere Instagram postings and drop-offs. So I'll just go through these real quick, as I always do. Uh-oh. I pushed a button I shouldn't have pushed. Hold on. All right, there we go.
Yeah, in lieu of our photo contest, not photo contest, actual photo outings, we're doing everything virtual. So we have a themed photograph every month, and then we do it virtually.
Yeah, this is exactly what Richard said. So in addition to our normal monthly competition, these are just kind of an opportunity as people are out and about to take pictures following the theme. So we got some pretty good ones here. Okay, Chuck, are you there? I didn't see you come in, so I guess not. September's virtual photo walk challenge is patterns. Chuck loves patterns, in case you haven't noticed that, but it's a key element of composition is the pattern. It's got lines and dots and swirls, and you can find patterns just about everywhere. So we would ask that you go out and try and find some patterns and submit them for your virtual photo walk for the rest of September. You can post them on Instagram and then just use the hashtag CCB Patterns 2001. Don't forget Camera Club of Brevard. And if you don't do that, just send them into info@CC Brevard along with the virtual photo walk of of the patterns, and we'll put them in next month. Charlie, was that you ringing?
Oh, no, no.
Somebody's cell phone wasn't on mute. Okay, monthly competition themes for September. It's motion. And how many had fun with this one, with motion? I know I did. We had some really, really good submissions, and Pat's been gathering them all up, and she kind of alluded to the one that I submitted finally. So get them in by midnight tonight, 2,000 pixels max on the long edge. And then we can look down the road to October, where we have open and creative. And that's we do that about 3 or 4 times a year. And so the topic is totally yours. So you submit either your Class A or your Class B. And then you can submit up to 2 creative competition entries. So you can have up to 3 that you can submit. So that's always good. November's reflection, and then December, we're going to have our annual photo competition. So details about that as we get a little bit closer. From the competition director, do you have anything for us, Pat? I guess not. John, what do you have? I see your hand is up.
Yeah, hi, John Gramanis. This is my first venture into the camera club.
Oh.
So some of the things I belonged to a club in New England before we moved, but some of the things that you're talking about are news to me in terms of what your guidelines are for your images, where to post, how to post. So
Okay.
if you have someplace to direct us to find that information, so you can briefly go over it, that would be great.
Sure. Most of that's on our website under competitions.
Okay.
Pat, do you want to talk to that or do you want me to?
You can if you'd like to. I'd just like to say he can find it on the web, just like you were telling him. So you can go ahead.
Sure. It's on our website, and every year we choose what the topic is going to be for the year for our monthly competitions, and this is a little bit left over from when we used to meet in person. We all fondly think back upon those times, but when we used to meet in person, everybody would bring in a print, and the print would be 11 by 14 or something like that. We'd set them around the room, and then typically our presenter for the month would go around and be the judge, and we would have first, second, and third place for category A, for category B, and then whenever we had the creative class, which was open to some sort of creative interpretation or modifying of the picture. And so this is now done virtually since the pandemic thing. Is that you, John? Did you have a further question there? Or?
I
Okay.
wasn't barking, no.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing part of the question there.
Just clarify what you mean by A and B, and I'm good.
Okay. I don't know the exact definition off the top of my head, but Class A is generally those who are a little bit more experienced in photography, or they've won a competition or two with us or elsewhere, and so it's kind of the folks that have been at it a while. Class B is those that are a little bit more on the learning end of things. So if you think of it in those terms, and I'll be the first one to admit that there's a lot of overlap. We have people in Class B that should be in A, and there's probably a few in A that could easily be in B. So there's a lot of overlap. So we leave that up to you to decide, are you a Class A-er or a Class B-er for the most part.
Gordon, let me clarify that a little bit.
Sure,
If you're
go
in
ahead.
Class A, you can't then automatically go to Class B if you don't want to be in Class A. But if you ask the camera club through an email or something, we'll take a look and say, okay, and then you can go down to Class B. So you can't jump back and forth.
So you can raise your level, but not decrease your level.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, and also in most cases, everybody that started out with the club started in B, and if you've won a couple of first placements in B, you're eligible to move up to Class A.
And beyond eligible, I would say you're expected to, because you've proven that you have the skill set to compete in A, and you don't want to be clogging up the pipeline in B for the others that are more or less starting out.
Hey, Gordy.
Yes.
Have him look in the upper right-hand corner of the main webpage where the 3 lines are.
Yes.
Because it's hard to find. So if he looks where the 3 lines are, he'll see competitions. He hits competitions, he'll see the rules and regulations.
Okay, there you go. It's on there. All righty. Thank you, Ann. New members and guests, chime in and let us all know who you are. I'm going to stop sharing here so we can go back to seeing everyone. So if you're a new guest today, please raise your hand and or give a quick little bio on yourself. Go ahead there, Lisa.
Hi, everyone. I just joined maybe a month ago. I was working where I couldn't join for the past couple of years. So when I changed my schedule, I was able to finally join you guys, and I'm looking forward to interacting. And I've been amateur photographer for about 5 years now or so. Been taking some classes online and stuff like that. So just looking forward to really getting into it and learning some new stuff and honing my skills.
Well,
what was your last name, Lisa?
Excuse me?
What was your last name?
Beheler, Beheler.
Okay. Well, welcome to the club.
Thank you.
all right. Who else is out there? I know we had at least a couple people that were new this go around. Anybody? No?
Yeah, hi, my name's Eric.
Okay.
Yeah, this is my first time on the club.
Oh, there you are.
Starting my video up. Here we go.
Welcome, Eric.
I'm cooking dinner, so not much to see behind me. But anyway, yeah, so I've been a photographer. I mean, an amateur photographer for years. I live on the coast here. We have so much natural beauty, around us. So I thought, I was in a print shop the other day, and the guy told me about the club, and I thought I'd join and learn a little bit. So here we are.
You must have been with Dan Sterling then.
It was
Dan
Dan.
Strybey, yeah, it's Sterling.
Yeah. So
And also, we're all amateurs in this club.
awesome.
Well, we'll look forward to your contributions. I'm sure there's plenty of us that could learn from you as well, Eric. So we're looking forward to having you in the club. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Good to be here.
Super. Who else? Anybody else? All right. Let's see. I'm going to go back to sharing. I can figure out how to do it. There we go. Okay. This is a little blurb for what we were just talking about. Competition help documents are available on our website for those of you who would like a little bit more guidance and help on the competitions. Like Ann mentioned, the three little lines at the top right corner of the club gives you the menu, and you can dig down in a level or two, and there's competition help for you there. Let's see. Announcements. Does anybody have any announcements, Cheryl Bennett?
I do. Hello, everyone. About 2 months ago, many of you visited the Cape Canaveral Lighthouse, and I want to thank you for that. And for those that are interested in helping to support the Lighthouse, our major fundraiser, annual fundraiser, is coming up, and we are holding it at the American Muscle Car Museum in Melbourne. It's on October 23rd. It starts at 6 o'clock and will end about 8:15 or 8:30. There will be auctions and prizes, food and drink, and of course, over 300 restored American muscle cars. It is a fabulous place to go. If you haven't been there, this is a fabulous opportunity, and also will help support the Cape Canaveral Lighthouse Foundation in our quest to preserve the history for everyone who comes after us. The tickets are maybe a bit pricey. They are $100 each. But for that, you will get some food and some drink, and of course, those wonderful cars. I have tickets available. Feel free to call me or email me, and I'll get the ticket to you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate the few minutes.
What is your email?
My email is CHEBENN76@gmail.com.
Cheryl, can you repeat that? Because some of it was a little breaking up on my end.
Okay, it is the first few letters of my name. So it's CHEBENN76@gmail.com.
That was much clearer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And
Cheryl,
and I-
are you looking for items to donate, to be donated?
Yes, we are looking for items to donate.
I could probably help you with that.
Okay, we'll talk about that. Thank you, Peter.
And for those who have never been to the American Muscle Car Museum, it blows me away the quality of the vehicles they have on display there. As Cheryl mentioned, there's over 300 of them. And they're not just 68 Cudas and 69 Mustangs. There's everything under the sun there. And they are absolutely pristine. I remember when I toured, they had to drag my jaw along with me because I couldn't keep it up. They have a number of cars that were built at the factory, and they were purchased by the Muscle Car Museum back in the 70s and 80s, and they were delivered to the Muscle Car Museum, and they still have they've never been cleaned by a dealer. In other words, they're literally from the factory, and they have there's probably 10 or more that have under 10 miles on them. And then there's, of course, many, many more. So it is a fabulous place to go to take pictures, and the cars are in pristine condition. Absolutely a magnificent museum. So if anybody.
And I also want to mention that this is a private museum. It is not open to the public.
Correct. The only way to get in there is to go in one of these events. And I forget the name of the owner, but
His name is Mark Pylock.
right. And
He has quite a collection.
This is his collection, and he puts his museum out available to nonprofits for fundraisers, just in this fashion. And so
Exactly.
it's not like you can just pick a Saturday and you're going to be able to go out there. It's only open for private events, and it's a spectacular opportunity to go and take advantage of it. Okay.
Thank you.
Tonight, we are very happy to have Deborah Sandidge here. And if I would just ask one more time, if everybody would please mute their particular settings so that we do not have any interruptions as Deborah presents. This is the second time she's presented to the Camera Club of Brevard. I think the first time was in public a couple of years ago. She's a distinguished Nikon ambassador. Now, mind you, not your everyday run-of-the-mill Nikon ambassador. She is a distinguished Nikon ambassador. Anyway, her presentation tonight is Land to Sea and Near to Far, and she'll take us through some of her experiences and imagery that she has available to us. Here's just a couple of examples, and Deborah can take us through. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Deborah, you are cleared to share, and the floor is yours.
Can I just add one thing? I want to thank Deborah for accepting our invitation to the club. And also, she prefers, if there's questions, to ask them at the end of the program instead of in the middle. But if you put something in the chat, and I think there needs to be some clarification on anything, I'll try to jump in with that question to Deborah.
Thank you. Let's see if I can get this to share here.
We got it.
There we go. Very good. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm excited to be here to talk with you about Land to Sea, Near to Far. So obviously travel a little bit more locally recently, but hopefully be reaching out soon. So the ideas I want to share with you this evening are the what, the how, the why. So basically the reasons behind the photograph, what the photograph is, and kind of how I did it. So I'll share with you a few ideas to see how this works. So this is a double exposure. So I was excited to share a few ideas. You guys were talking about having motion as one of your themes. So this is just simply done in camera. So I work with Nikon cameras. So I'm working with the new mirrorless cameras, and these cameras have double exposure options. So this is something that I took over on the East Coast. So I shot something of the incoming tide. And then I also shot a second shot of all the froth, all the bubbles, all the action. So what happens, and I create this in camera that blends the two images. So you have something that's a lot more depth, a lot more interest, and a lot more fun and excitement. So I love working with this idea. So very simple, double exposure. And I know you have reflections coming up too. So this is one of my favorite photographs. I like to share with you how I took this. So that, obviously this is just a boat, but it's the sea of reflections that make it so interesting. So basically I isolated the boat. And that was the subject, but the reflections are what make it so exciting. So as the wind began to move, the reflections just really started to scatter. So I love the idea of that. So filling the frame with color. So what, how, why? So of course, what is the photo subject? Why the essence of the image? And how is the technique? So those are the things that we'll be talking about this evening. Travel, near and far. So this is New York, sort of behind the scenes. So this is a lot of fun. So I happen to use this little tripod. It's very cool. If you don't want to have to carry a big heavy tripod, I use this tripod. I put it on the ledge and I'm photographing out over the cityscape. So I kind of wanted to show you kind of what I'm experiencing, how I see things. So I'm getting ready to shoot down 34th Street and getting all the cityscape during the evening. So I try to include a little behind the scenes shots as I go through this. But we'll make a quick jaunt down to Cuba. This is a really fun place to shoot. I absolutely love it. In this type of shot, I like to fill the frame with the subject. So rather than I think it's really easy to stand and shoot from eye level. So if you change the dynamic of your shot by getting low, you create a different drama. And also you have a little bit of this background of an environmental shot. So you have a sense of place, you know that this is Cuba, and then just filling the frame with the car. So I love doing this. If you're going to that car show, that might be a fun thing to do. You know, cameras have those tilt monitors, so you can get very low and create a really different image. Ballerinas, again, giving your image a sense of place is super important with travel, no matter where you are. If you're local here in Melbourne area, if you're down in Cuba or different places. So this is the El Morro Lighthouse. So that lighthouse is a central part of showing where a sense of place is. And I love the ballerinas. There's such grace and such beauty. And another place in Cuba. So this is Santiago. This is an amazing place. Tried to go on my first trips, wasn't able to actually get there. The aircraft didn't make it. So we had a good return, but this third time we did. And when I found this, it's a little bit easier to navigate now because we have the location apps and things like that. So, but it's a little difficult at the time when I was at Cuba, we didn't have a lot of the location apps, but so, kind of did a walkthrough. So scouting is super important to when I travel. I try to find out as much as possible, like where I want to shoot, what are the applications I can use to help me get the best shot. And this was during the blue hour, and that was important to me to be there. But I realized once I got to the location, finally, by asking a lot of people, I was right smack in front of this beautiful 15th century cathedral. But it's really hard to be able to shoot this with a wide angle lens when you're standing right in front of it. So quick little scouting showed that there was a cafe not too far away, just a few blocks away, and getting elevated and shooting down. So that gives a really sense of place. You can see the plaza, you can see the beautiful architecture of this 15th century chapel. So I'd love to work with the idea again of changing the angle. So Palouse, this is in Washington State. If you haven't been to Palouse, it's absolutely gorgeous. So I love working with the idea of showing the beauty of a particular location. So Palouse, again, from research, I had a couple lenses that I thought I would use. And I always travel with like a 14 to 24, a 24 to 70, and a 70-200. And in this case, I had a 200 to 500 millimeter lens, which I ended up using. This was the lens to help me define the landscape, to show the sculpting, the gentle patterns, the light and shadow, and also being here at a certain time, being there at the end of the day. So that's when the patterns are really showing up, the light of the contour of landscape. So if I would have showed up here clearly at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, wouldn't have this sculpted and this beautiful type of landscape. So the zoom lens, the telephoto zoom, helped me isolate part of that subject and show the landscape in a way that a wide angle wouldn't be able to do. So really, I always think about when I travel, it's always going to be this lenses plus a fisheye, and I'll show you fisheye later, but those are fun to do. So I saw this place that I wanted to go to is Wagon Wheels, really interesting. So I photographed it during the day. I photographed it in infrared because I really like to work with infrared. And then I came back at night and shot it again. So in this case, I actually walked around, had my camera on a tripod, used about 30 seconds and then took that time to walk down the length and paint this with a flashlight. So I had a flashlight with a colored gel. You can buy the little Rogue colored gels and create this kind of colorful, interesting landscape. So I think, again, the contrast, the blue, the red, that was what drew me to this shot. And of course, all the aircraft are amazing, and the yellow landscape. But again, it's just if you can put the colors blue and gold together, it's very strong, very powerful color connotations, and it really draws in the viewers. So working with that idea in the photograph. So this was a lot of fun. So I love the idea of working with multiple and double exposures, as you saw earlier. So in this shot, I thought that I would work with a series of exposures. I think there are about 7 or 8 shots here, consecutively shot on in camera and blended in camera with my Nikon camera. But these are the turbines, so and they're interesting. They're beautiful to shoot, but they have a whimsical look when you're photographing them as a multiple exposure. Then it becomes very graphic. You've got the green grass, the vivid blue sky, and they look like dandelions to me. They're really quite fun to work with. So multiple exposure shots. So think about that as you're shooting. You know, everything doesn't have to be a still. And that's one of the important things in my images, is conveying a sense of time passing. And so you'll see that theme in a lot of my photos. So in this photo, I was able to work with the idea simply of multiple exposures.
Deborah,
Yes.
what do you mean by the Nikon cameras blending the photo in camera?
Yes. So what happens is most cameras have this, so I don't want to isolate it. Just put the Nikon, if you go to the multiple exposure setting, you'll have the option to create from 2 to 10 images. So it will shoot 2 to 10 images however you like. And you also have, we'll talk about a little bit more about the multiple exposures in a moment, but you have the option to blend those and average those. So each shot is averaged. And so the end result is one perfect exposure, or you can add them, and that sort of changes the whole dynamics. And we'll talk about the different blend modes in a moment. That's a good question, but multiple exposure is amazing. And this can be done in the camera. So that was the result of the wind turbines. San Francisco. Oh, this is really one of my favorite places to go. I usually go a couple times a year. This is the other bridge. There's the Golden Gate Bridge, and there's the San Francisco Oakland Bay Bridge, which is really one of my favorites. I love this bridge. So I will start. So generally, the way I like to start shooting it, especially when I'm traveling, I like to start like an hour before sunrise and just wait for the good light. And then that's what was happening in this case. I absolutely loved the beautiful light before sunrise, because I know sunrise is the event, but usually it's being there that hour prior, you get amazing light. So working with the idea of narrowing the aperture, so an aperture maybe f16 or f11 creates the pretty little starburst that you see going across the bridge. And also this shot was probably about 30 seconds long. So waiting for the light, that's how I love to work with the photographs. A little bit north of that area is the Fisherman's Wharf area. That was the Embarcadero area. And this is a fun place to shoot. So here I'm just shooting the reflection of the subject, not the subject itself. So I love what happens with this. So there were these are all the fishing boats that are in that area. So going from the Embarcadero, just going up and using that light around 8 or 9 o'clock to work with the beautiful, vibrant colors. See, a little bit later in the day, you lose some of that vibrancy. So working on shooting as vibrant as possible. Using the slow motion feature in your cameras can be amazing. So this is simply a slow motion video taken from my camera of those fishing boats. So really, really fun to do. So I'd love to work with that idea. A little bit later, I came back and get a little tired from shooting. I ran up to my hotel room, and I was lucky enough to have a vantage point where I could see these clouds starting to develop, which is so uncommon. I mean, they don't usually over the bridge, it's more dry area. So I don't usually see this big voluminous cloud. So I completely enjoyed seeing this. And I literally ran back down to the Embarcadero. And I walked a little bit to see where I wanted to compose the shot. I knew these clouds weren't going to last very long. So I saw the remains of this old dock, which I thought was so interesting, the very old, of course, with the contemporary architecture of the bridge. So working with that, and there's a dynamic flow from left bottom to the top right. So I love that flow of the image. I knew also that I wanted to shoot a long exposure. So you'll have a lot of long exposure shots in this presentation. So I chose a shot. It's about a 6-minute exposure. So I'm using neutral density filters to control light because, you know, as you know, if you're shooting and you're at the limits of your camera, you need to go past 30 seconds or to reach, you know, several minutes or more, you need to control the light through neutral density filters. So I generally use a 15-stop neutral density filter. And I'll talk a little bit more about that too. But what happens is you can see the way that the clouds, they're wind painted clouds. So the cloud, it captures the motion during that 6 minutes of time. And that's something I really enjoy working with. So shooting, so this is a Transamerica building. So blue hour, I plan to be at the right place at the right time and hoping for clouds. Of course, there were no clouds that evening. So I was trying to think about alternate compositions. What is it that I can do to make a more expressive and interesting shot? So I wanted to compose a frame within the frame. So I actually put the camera down on the bench and shot through the bench to capture the Transamerica building, but also taking note of the time. So waiting for the blue hour, that's one of the most expressive times of the day. I love to shoot at the blue hour. So after sunset, waiting about 45 minutes, it's just like 45 minutes before sunrise, you're waiting for the beautiful light of the blue hour. So that was the idea behind making the shot. A little bit different. If I was standing up, you wouldn't have that same vantage point. So working again with blue and gold to get a lot of different expressive type of shots. So I love this shot. This is one of my favorites. So in San Francisco, I always finish the day by shooting the cable cars. So I loved doing this. So I'll go out at night so you can see the end of the blue hour. Now it looks like I'm standing in a very sketchy and dangerous spot, but I'm not. It's totally fine. I'm using a zoom lens and the cable car will actually shift track. So I don't have to worry about being a fatality in this case, but I love the idea again of capturing a little bit of time passing. So you can see the streaks of light from the passing cars in the background. That's about a 10-second shot. So there's a little bit of motion in that. So this shot is not static. And again, just capturing the cable car, which, you know, to me just speaks all about Colorado and California and San Francisco. So we'll go over to Provence. This is one of my very favorite places to go to. Absolutely love, and it's the lavender fields. So when you go, it's in July or June, the lavender fields are absolutely beautiful. So the idea behind this shot was to, again, convey a sense of motion with the clouds. So I could shoot a static shot, but to have those clouds stretching across the sky. So you can see that motion. Again, that's an element of having a wide angle lens, and it really captures the stretch of the clouds. So I often will work with the wide angle lens and the lavender here. This was about a 6-minute shot. Actually had a friend who walked in this picture and walked back out. So you can't really see, but 6 minutes to me conveyed the message that the essence of that particular image. So I love to work with time passing. And I love this expression. It's not just what you see, but it's what you feel that makes for better pictures. So it's important to listen to your inner voice and seeing what happens. This is a little farmhouse and then also the lavender, but in this case, I did something a little bit different. So if you've ever shot a time lapse, you have many shots. So you have like a ton of images. So Gordy, you probably have shot lots of stars and that kind of thing. So working with the idea of having a time lapse. So I shot this as a time lapse and I had all the images and I took those images then at home, not in my camera, and blended them as one. So here you have what they call a time stack. So it's what happens when you shoot star trails. So I'll show you that. So it's just, you get this sense of motion with the clouds. So just an alternate way to tell your story. So if you have a great subject, you really want to think about a great way to be able to work with that subject. The horses, we went down to Camargue, and these are the white horses that are there. They're absolutely beautiful, breathtaking creatures. And I love this because when we first got there, they brought the horses out to you. And so the horses would sort of stand off and they would check you out. And then finally they get a little closer and they would nibble on my hat, or they would just come up. They sort of wanted to just get to know you a little bit. But the ultimate part of this was they would run the horses and they would actually run them past us. So we were able to photograph a really amazing shots. So this shot, I used a zoom lens to be able to capture some of the action. So the horseplay, they're just running and playing together. And but I love the different feeling of this particular shot. These horses actually ran towards us too, and we had a couple of friends were actually laying down on shore, which I wouldn't recommend. We're on shore to take these photos. As the horses ran towards us, they actually didn't see us and they jumped over us at the last moment. So thankfully we weren't hurt. I got some nice pictures of horse bellies and things like that, but fun stuff. I love the sunflowers are amazing there. So I had fields of sunflowers to photograph. And this was one that I think I was on the plane. I was kind of playing around with the color, but I loved the yellow, kind of work with the idea. So I always let the photograph kind of guide me. So I shot this, I have this way, and I like the pink. So don't be afraid to play with your photos creatively. So I want to talk about the fisheye zoom lens. This is a lens that's near and dear to my heart. I love it. You have a unique perspective. You can shoot at 8mm or 15mm, and this is on a full frame sensor camera. So I brought it to Tanzania when I was there, and I so enjoyed working with this. So this is the 15mm end, hand holding it, but slow motion. So you can actually shoot slow motion video and not worry about the camera being too jittery. So this is above. There's actually a little crocodile down there. So working with this, if you tilt the fisheye, you saw that it was perfectly straight in that first photo, but if you tilt the fisheye, then you get this on top of the world bendy distortion, which I love. So you have that option. It's a very creative type of lens. So I took it up to New York City. This is Times Square. Love to shoot with this. Put the camera down, put the camera on self timer. So, I just stepped away from the shot, and then the camera can, that otherwise with a fisheye, you'll find out that you'll be in most of your pictures if you're not careful. So this was the shot, shooting at between the hours of like 10 to 2. This is really kind of nice. That's the time you think typically wouldn't be great for photography, but for cityscapes, it's great. The light is very balanced. So all throughout the scene, the light is balanced. So there's no like harsh, dark shadows. So then, and also, that you see that little sunburst at the top. So working with the idea of creating a little sunburst by positioning the camera so part of it is showing. If you narrow the aperture, so f11, f16, you'll get that nice little shot. Same difference, except now the lens is at 8mm. So this is all in camera. This is not anything Photoshop. This is just how the picture is rendered by the fisheye lens. So I absolutely love this. So at 8mm, it's a perfect circle. So I had fun working with that. So I'll do that. I'll if I'm San Francisco, New York City, wherever I'm at, the Rockies, I love taking that type of shot. A little bit later at night, so working with the idea of, again, getting some really interesting shots at night. This is Quebec City. So I had fun with this shot. Well, actually, a friend and I had traveled up to New York, and then we went up into Canada and just loved it. And just really the thing about traveling is just walking and meeting people. So it's scouting areas you want to shoot for later. And that's what happened. We came across this spot. It was probably about 10 o'clock at night. And I thought, oh, we have to come back. So I kept my fingers crossed that it would be a clear, bright, sunny day, no clouds. So I would get not only the crystal sunburst, but the shadows. So I love what you talked about, patterns. Here's an idea of how to work with patterns in your shot. So you have all the repeating shapes of the shadows of the umbrellas. So you can the repeating shape of the umbrellas themselves. So it's really, really fun to work with. And then simply took the camera and aimed it straight up and shot what was above me, these umbrellas. So I filled the frame with color and of these colorful umbrellas. And again, getting that sparkle, narrowing the aperture and getting that in the shot. So it's fun. I absolutely love working with the fisheye. It's just definitely one of my favorite lenses. So I love to work with infrared photography. I actually wrote a book called Digital Infrared Photography. It was published by Wiley. And in that book, I talk a lot about the 720 nanometer modification, or some people use the R72 filters on their lenses, but I love infrared. It's very, very different. It's surreal and beautiful. And it gives you an alternate way to be able to tell your story. So you're shooting in color, and then maybe you're shooting long exposure. Maybe you'll go back at the blue hour, and then maybe you can go shoot it in infrared. So, it gives you a wonderful way to be able to record and expressive memories. So in this case, this was the little chapel. I loved the idea of working with this. I saw the clouds and I waited. I had the camera. I just waited for that moment as the clouds went up past me on this hill and framed the tree. So you notice that the key elements of infrared is that very vibrant white foliage. So I love what happens with that. So the grass is very light and the trees are very light. So this isn't something you can actually reproduce so much in Photoshop. You can sometimes fake it a little bit, but there's nothing quite like an infrared image. So here I changed the angle too. So I got very low down into the grasses, which are very interesting textures. So I think you talked about textures and patterns. So I love this. What was happening with the foreground was being repeated in the sky. So I wanted to be able to get down low and shoot this at a different angle. So again, playing with angles and working with infrared. That's the location of the wagon wheels that you saw in an earlier shot. This was during the day. So repeating light and shadows of the wagon wheels. So I made sure I positioned it so I was able to compose to get that in the shot. Really can't stress enough the benefits of a wide angle lens. It does make a tremendous difference in your travel shots. Leading line. In color, I took this, it wasn't as interesting because everything was sort of mid-tone. The grass was kind of green and the path was kind of middle toned also, and the blue sky. So shooting, it was fine, but it wasn't as interesting to me as when I shot it in infrared. So then you have this very distinctive path that leads towards the barn and the leading line of the fence. So I love to work with that idea of infrared. So I didn't get the chance to go to Stonehenge, but I did get to go to Carhenge. So that was fun to be able to shoot. So they have these cars as in Alliance, Nebraska. So I really thought it was interesting to be able to photograph this. I shot a long exposure of this, and then I shot it in infrared. And I thought it was just as much fun. You'll see that the contrast area between the sky and the clouds tends to be very dramatic, which adds to the shot, which is a lot of fun to work with this. This is really one of my favorite shots. This was in Tanzania, in the Serengeti, and there was a beautiful storm coming. I absolutely love working with storms, and the clouds were so dramatic. And I was shooting a color, but then I saw this elephant. We were just sort of walk into the scene where we were. So beautiful to be able to photograph. This was not with a zoom lens. So this was with a 24 to 70 millimeter lens with my infrared camera. So the elephant was that close and just was kind of interested in us, didn't really come forward, but just relaxed and stayed there posing for me for this shot. So I love working with that idea. Again, the elements of infrared intensify the drama in the sky and also in the foreground. Animals like elephants will tend to look pretty much to their natural color. Fisheye lens. So down in, I think it's Vero Beach, there is a place, McKee, I believe it's called. That is a fun place to visit. It'd be a great place for a field trip. You've got all the different palm trees. So simply pointing the camera up in infrared. So we'll talk about birds for a moment. So when we started with this pandemic, it was a difficult thing, obviously, as you all will know, to go through So I was thinking about the ways that I could work with personal projects. So I did have, in that way, I did have an opportunity to pursue some things that I hadn't pursued in a while. I used to love to shoot birds. So I was super excited to have this opportunity. So what you see in this shot was I actually set up my camera in my office window to be able to photograph birds right outside my window. So I had a feeder set up, just a very small platform feeder, maybe 4 inches, and some perches. So I had set that up to be able to shoot. So this red cable that you see is a microphone. So I set the microphone underneath the feeders so I could hear the birds every time, that they had little voices and communication. It was really quite interesting. So this is on my desk. This is a Wimberley, the tripod head that you see. This was the Wimberley head is actually here. Then I've got my camera. It's a 500 millimeter lens. So working with that. And that bird was a cardinal right there in front of the camera. So I loved working with that idea. So painted bunting, this little bird came, I was super excited. I'd never seen a painted bunting in my life. So I was really excited to be able to photograph this bird. They're so colorful. I thought it was a parrot. I thought maybe it was someone's parrot. I just never had seen anything like this in my backyard even. This is amazing. This is the microphone that you see. So he didn't sing, but I did have that opportunity to shoot him in front of the microphone. So I'm about 18, 20 feet away from the bird. So it's right outside my window. So I had set up a perch and got the painted bunting. So he would come over to maybe grab a seat and then just sort of relax. If you are interested in shooting birds, from your home, and there's an article on, I write for Shutterbug. I don't sure if I actually told you that before. So Shutterbug magazine has all my articles. So there's a recent one on that. So you can look at that. Just Google my name, Deborah Sandidge, shutterbug.com. And you'll see the little painted bunting. So cool. So shooting a little video through my office window. I don't know if you can hear them chirping in the background. There's a tufted titmouse, the second bird. So it's really an interesting thing to be able to do over the last year. So I'm looking forward to doing this again when it's not quite as hot as you know. It's pretty hot. These are brown thrashers. Amazing to be able to photograph. They look like hawks to me. Their eyes are so intense. And the first time I saw this bird, I was just so fascinated. So I tried to design the feeders so I had the least amount of depth of field issues. So if it was a very wide feeder, the birds would be really far apart. So I worked hard to get this, to create a natural looking area so they could go and just to observe their behavior. So it's fascinating. So this is my Nikon Z7 2 and a 500 millimeter lens. Tufted titmouse. These are super tiny birds. I know he looks really big here, but so the pattern of this bird, and this is the cool thing you could watch their behavior and sort of understand how they do things. So they like to go over and grab a seed and go to a nearby branch and the seed and hold. Actually, you can see how he's holding the nut in his claws and being able to dine on that. Slow motion video. So this is also done in slow motion video. So it's really nice if you have that option. So Anhinga, this is at a local park nearby, was in Orlando. So I love. Again, I want to fill the frame with color. So I just waited for that moment, that gesture. So as the bird spread the wings, that was that moment I wanted to make the shot and have the bird looking back at me. So beautiful reflections in the background. So I try to be very conscious of the backgrounds when I'm composing the shots. So I'm not always at eye level. I might get down really low or change the point of view to be able to accentuate the shot. This is a great blue heron. So I love this. So such a noble, interesting bird, but I love the color, the wash of reflections in the background. So again, I really had to angle the camera so I could just pick up the beautiful blues in the background. So this was a fun shot. So I'm swimming with the ducks here, sort of, kind of. So I actually have my camera in the water, just not like deep in the water, but I'm using a waterproof housing. I use Altex on my camera. So the camera I'm using the fisheye lens. So remember the fisheye, I said it was such a versatile lens. So I just basically put it at water level and the ducks swam around the camera. And so I was able to make some really interesting dynamic shots. So the ducks look gargantuan and they're not that big, but you feel like you're there. And that's the message. That was the meaning of the shot. So really had fun with this shot. So exploring the world a little closer, absolutely so much fun. And that's been an interesting thing to do. If I'm traveling, I might not have time to really stop and see some of these really small things that are amazing. I just took this. This is over. They're pentas, the penta flowers. And I had my 105 millimeter. It's a brand new lens that Nikon has. And it was amazing to get this bee, in flight coming towards me. So again, that sense of motion, you see the wings, you capture that motion in the wings. So that to me was a really fun way. So then I kind of got addicted to the bee thing. And so working with the idea of capturing these, is so beautiful and so colorful, all in one small shot. So there's a small moth, and then we have this upside down bees taking advantage of this. And, it's one thing too, when you take these pictures and you're looking at them at the back of your camera, and then you get them home and you look on the monitor, and it's just so sensational, the detail that you can appreciate. So I really enjoyed the opportunity to shoot this amazing little bee and see so much, I think there's so much of nature, like the birds, the birds were a little bit further out, but when you see them closer, then you can take in the behavior and their activity and how they live. It's just fascinating. So here the bee, obviously, and collecting all the pollen mode.
Is Deborah, is the 105 a macro lens?
Yes, they call it MC, yes, the macro is considered a macro lens. So there's actually two new Nikon lenses. There's a 50 millimeter, which the one I just took of that bee close up, it was a lens where you get close and you get closer and it actually extends another part of the lens, which is fascinating. But the bees are, I like them with the 105. That was really a nice shot. Bees have space issues. You don't want to get too close. So yeah, I shouldn't tell this story. My much better half kind of had a collision with a bee on a mountain biking trip, and he was unconscious for like 25 minutes. So I couldn't shoot bees for years. But he's fine. But so I'm more interested in him now that I know he's safe. So art is not what you see, but what you others see. And I think that's so fascinating to think about as a quote, because everyone really sees part of you. That's what makes it so essential and so unique. So double exposures, and we saw multiple exposures earlier, but double exposures is something that I've been working with, and also self-portraiture. That's been an interesting thing to work with. I'm not normally, I didn't do a lot of people. I did a lot of lifestyle photography years ago. Then I got really involved with travel, and so I didn't have that opportunity. So more recently in the last year or so, I'm working with the idea of self-portraiture and double exposure. So again, this is no Photoshop. This is in the camera. So I'm taking a photograph, and in this case, I'm shooting myself, and I have a app called SnapBridge. It's an app for Nikon cameras, so I can actually control. So that's sort of what I'm doing. I'm looking at the, composing so to get the shot. So it controls the camera, makes the shot, and then later I go back and shoot flowers. So or whatever it is that I want to fill the frame with. So, but I add this to the picture, and it blends them, and it's so interesting because then the flowers look like they're, I want to see, just part of you. So it's a really expressive, interesting thing. So layers of interest, a story within a story is sort of how I really feel about double exposures. It's not so literal, it's not like you took a snapshot at the beach. This is something that has more depth and is more imaginative and creative. So I love that. I don't know if anybody listens to Tupac, but it is so interesting how it starts. There's a line, it's a simple element, and they add another line and another line. So it becomes a tapestry of music. And that's kind of how I feel about the double exposures. It's really, there's a lot to them. So working with that idea. So it's very kind of mysterious and interesting. I love working with the flowers. At the last minute though, again, I try to let the subject guide me on how to work with an image. So when I shot this, I was thinking I wanted to have something that was very, almost kind of floral, tropical, very Florida. And then I decided to take it in the direction of more vintage. So you can do that with the camera control. So in this one, I used a sepia to sepia, and this is all done in the camera. Double exposure, you saw that earlier. So a lot of fun to shoot, lots of depth, lots of, again, interest, just to be able to combine those two images. So it just gives the image a little bit more than just what you saw. So it adds a richer tapestry to this. So I love what happened with the bubbles. So this was so much fun to do. It's a sunrise, but it's not a literal sunrise. It's one that you feel you might get wet. You might want to have to step back. You might get splashed. And then indeed I did. So this is why I use the waterproof housing in this situation. But you kind of have to get into it if that's what you want, and that's being able to work with that type of shot. This was a double exposure early on. I love the idea. This was at Merritt Island, so the wildlife refuge area. So in January, it tends to be interesting. The leaves are off the trees, and so I shot a silhouette of this one tree, and then I went back and shot all the leaves that were around it on the ground, and combined this image, and then you can see all the different textures. So it speaks about fall. But it's not just a picture about fall. It is more of a feeling, a mood. So again, that's that tapestry, and you can do this. So most cameras have that mode in the camera where you can blend the images, and I love working with that. So these are little beach flowers. I love the beach flowers. I thought it'd be interesting if I took a close up of the flower, and that's what you see in the background, then also all the other flowers. So then it becomes more interesting, a little bit more rich in the story. So that's the idea behind that. So the double exposure technique, this is explained pretty much through how I shoot with a Nikon camera. So there is for most cameras, there's a multiple exposure mode. So you can just check that out in your camera settings. I was using 2 shots. I chose 2 shots, and then I used the overlay mode of add. So working with that by choosing a first photo and then choosing a second. So there's 2 ways to do double exposures. You can do them as image overlays or just the double exposures. Just depends on your camera. So this is me. So working with the idea of a silhouette. So I did a lot with silhouettes for a while. So I love the idea of that. And then filling the frame with flowers. So I shot this silhouette at the beach, and then I came back and I arranged flowers and then shot this. So that was really kind of an interesting way to be able to work with that. So that's my first shot. My second shot, the end result. So you can see how this process works. So that was a silhouette, those are the flowers, and that was the end result. So it is a really fun and challenging way to be able to work with double exposures. I can't stress that enough. It's fun, it's rewarding, it's fascinating. So we'll talk about Florida since we're all Floridians. So I love to go out in my kayak, and I love to row. Actually, I started at the beginning of this whole event. So I started rowing, the indoor rowing. So I'm all about 1.6 million meters. So I'll reach 2 million meters this year. So something I love to do, but I also like to kayak. So these are the ships, the boats that launched out at Beacon 42 out there, where if you're familiar with that area of Merritt Island, there's a launch point you can go to, and just took the kayaks out. But it was a reflection, a story within the story. So I love working with that, with the blue sky and the colorful reflections again, and just filling the frame with color. Storms are amazing. This is the area down in South Florida, Coral Cove. I love to photograph this. So I knew the storm was coming at a couple of days' notice. You could see on the weather radar, the storms were coming. So I tried to get down there as fast as possible. And it did come. It was an amazing storm. What I didn't anticipate was the intensity of the wind. So, having the microfiber cloths, wiping the camera down, dodging the rain, but it was so worth it. Whenever you get the gold and the blue color scheme, it's absolutely amazing. So I work a lot with different shutter speeds. So I will show you that thought process. So this one was about a 15th of a second, just enough to convey a sense of motion rather than just freezing the action. I do like to do both, but love to work with Storm. So freezing the action here. So working with 1/1000th of a second, freezing the action of the water as it is coming through these different rocks, capturing an interesting way. So to me, I like to work with different shutter speeds and create a different story. Love the action of the water in Coral Cove. So there is a place called Blowing Rocks you can go to, but a little bit south, there's also this area here, and it's two of my very favorite places in Florida, but blue sky, lots of action in the waves. So I'd love to be able to freeze the action of that. Slow motion video again. Wow. I was so excited to see this. To me, it was fascinating to see what happened as the waves would hit these rocks. And it's such power. It was just tremendous. And I can't believe that on another day, I'm snorkeling behind these rocks. It's so calm. So you just never know how the weather is going to be. But this is a very vibrant and active area. So Isle Morada, love shooting here. So enjoyed getting the shot with a fisheye lens. So here get very close. So I'd say this tree has a lot of sass, just the way, it just presents itself, but getting closer, the lens that you use, that makes a difference in your story. So that is a palm tree in Isle Morada. Colorado, love this area. This is Maroon Bells. The trick is to get to this location before sunrise, because once, and the trick is actually right now just to get to this location because they've gone to permits. So it's a little bit more challenging to get to. But I was up here about 4:30 in the morning waiting for this. And the main event is, so the golden light hits the bells across, so you can see all that golden glow across the bells. But it was about 4 in the morning again. I'd like to go. I'm shooting stars, it's beautiful. But I heard this voice because there were quite a few photographers gathering there. People just wanted to see this. But it was actually so familiar. And I turned, it was a friend of mine who had met at the Consumer Electronics Show where we were both speaking. And it's just Mandy, she was like, right there of all places to meet somebody randomly. So, but shooting this was really amazing. Like this is in September. So you really have a lot of fall color. Slow motion video. Again, this was not on a tripod, just shooting using that slow motion, just capturing little snippets that you can put together. I love video because it helps round out your story of being in a particular area at a particular time. So loved working with that idea. And shooting the pathways. Anytime you have a leading line, that's so wonderful to be able to put in your composition. And you have the blue sky and the golden leaves, again, really strong. The connotations of color are so important. Blue is so tranquil, and yellow is such a life color, is just amazing. So, and playing with that idea of getting that sunburst right behind one of those trees. So around F16, F11, and creating a nice little starburst. Looking up. So again, I like to give you that sense of being there. So that blue sky was so amazing, and the tree, and just being surrounded by those trees. So this to me feels like what it was like to be there at that moment, but just pointing that camera up and using a fisheye or even a wide angle lens at the widest setting. So nighttime. So really enjoyed working with the idea of shooting at night in Colorado. It was beautiful. I had all these amazing stars. So it was great to be able to shoot that. And then it took a lot of pictures. So again, shot over time. I love to convey what happens over time. So shooting this, all the different stars, over time. So I probably had a couple hundred of images to be able to make this final image. So as the Earth rotates, you get this sense of motion with the stars. So this was out in Colorado. So long exposure before dawn. I love this. I just did this. I was down in Jupiter. So again, I like to start well before sunrise. So that is my that is my jam. Absolutely love to do this. So this was actually dark. So when I got here, you really didn't get a sense. It's really hard to absorb like what's in the shot because it's dark. You know, we've got stars, but I love that transition between night and day. So we have the stars, but then you see the beginning of the morning through the clouds. So that to me is so interesting. A very active surf is softened over time. So you have that sense of tranquility with the shot. So, and then the rocks in the foreground anchor the shot. So I love working with that. So I did this down in Coral Cove and Jupiter just recently. So this particular one will show you, I didn't want to go too heavy on all the camera settings, but this gives you an idea of what I was shooting. So I'm shooting with a 14 to 24 ISO 1600 and 30 seconds. So with that particular lens, if that works, you often might have to increase your ISO to totally freeze the action of the stars. But if you want to have a little star blend action, that's totally fine. But it looks like daytime. You know, it's amazing to me that that you can get the sense of there's so much brightness actually over time, and that's going to be something I'm writing about shortly. So I'll send you guys the link to the article, but I love what happens over time. So this is night, but the camera can pick up so much information. So I'm always working with the idea of trying to get an idea of how to compose and what will happen over time. So several minutes here. Again, that transition of night to day. So the rocks are in the foreground. That white froth is all the surf, the active surf, but pretty much raining stars over several minutes. So amazing to be able to work with that idea. This was actually taken well before sunrise. So this is one of the little Art Deco lifeguard stands that are down in South Beach. They're so much fun to shoot. So this particular one is 10th Street. So I wanted to shoot this. I was really hoping I would have the opportunity for stars, but that didn't happen. There were so many clouds, but then I started thinking about it, that would be really an interesting shot. So you see a little bit of that blue hour peeking through behind the lifeguard stand. But behind me is the city lights. So the city lights are illuminating the lifeguard stand. So over time, so even though it was pitch black, like close your eyes, pitch black, to see this, I was able to focus with my flashlight just on a point on the lifeguard stand. And then I turned focus off and then made the shot. So this was Nikon Z7. It was a 14 to 30 lens when this lens first came out. So I was shooting at my lowest ISO for this type of shot because I want the 4-minute exposure. So again, letting those clouds be painted across the sky. So that's the idea of working with that type of shot. So I love what happens over time. This is night, actually. So love working with this. So the cloud motion was interesting to me. So at about 9:30 at night. But again, over time, those lifeguard stands are illuminated, so they pretty much look like daytime, but then you still have the softness of the water and the stretch of clouds. So again, I like to work a lot with the long exposures during the day. It's that very similar concept, except it's applied to night. 3-minute exposure. So sunrise, you guys do this all the time since you are over on the East Coast. So as you know, the moments before sunrise can be absolutely the best. I am a big fan of using filters to control light. So I use a reverse graduated neutral density filter if I need to. And what that does is balance the light in the composition. And also I often use a 3-stop neutral density filter to control light. So let's say you want to make a shot at a 20th of a second and you are at the limits of your camera, your ISO is as low as it could go, and you are at f22 or whatever it was, but you need more time to make that shot. That's where neutral density filters are very, very helpful. So it does help you to control light. So I usually use the lowest ISO if I'm trying to extend the shutter speed, high ISO to freeze the action. This one's a little bit of both. I was teaching in St. Augustine a few years ago, and horses, one of my workshops, was so amazing to be able to photograph horses on the beach. So I wanted to blend that concept of a slight blur, but yet freezing the action. You could see that the rider is perfectly still, but you see the horse's hoofs are moving through the water. So love the idea of working with that particular concept. Working with the idea, this is Lake Bled. This is one of my favorite places to work with, but absolutely beautiful light, and using, I used a grad neutral density filter because it was so blown out. You can just see the horizon line above the top of the frame. You absolutely begin to lose definition. So using a neutral density filter, again, the 2-stop reverse grad is my favorite. Does amazing work. It allows you to compose and shoot things that you would not normally do unless you had to digital blend or something fancy. Loved working with this. Again, here's that benefit of the wide angle lens. So you can see that stretch of sky from left to right. That reach is really so important. So if I was using let's say a 24 to 70, you just don't have quite that same information. So I love working with a wide angle lens. I find that absolutely essential. So this was about a 15th of a second, just soft enough so the incoming waves have a little bit of motion. You can see that on the edges, but I find that is really essential. So what do you do? So you go to the beach, you got up there an hour early and there's no clouds. And so now you're faced with the compositional challenges of making a cool shot, a fun shot. So what I did is I took my camera and I changed the lens to my 24-70 and got down very low, right at ground level, not at the water's edge where I would get my camera wet. Nowhere, that's what that zoom lens comes in handy. So I'm composing, so it's just over the rocks and you can see that action of the waves coming towards you. So this is where that 15th of a second, the 20th of a second is really, really important. And also not composing, so there's a tremendous amount of sky. So letting the foreground elements tell the story of the beach action. So that to me was really important. So you can see 24-70. And also the shutter speed. So shutter speed is really a wonderful way to be able to control the story that you are telling with your camera. Love, love, love having this, the action. So again, as the waves are coming toward me, I want you to feel like you might have to step back and the waves are right there. And working with the idea of creating a sense of motion, but getting those elements of sunrise. Oh, so fast. We went back here. So I love this, the wide angle lens. So just telling a little bit different story. So a lot of photographs I've just showed you were with the waves coming towards you, maybe around 15th or 20th of a second. So that was sort of the time frame of working with that. You can also work with the waves as they're receding and going back. So there's such a romance of this, with the waves going back to the ocean. It is so beautiful. So here is where I like to use maybe a couple seconds, a second or 2 seconds. So at that motion, that pattern, we were talking about patterns are so beautiful and they're all unique to each individual wave. So I love as these waves were pulling back to the ocean to be able to capture something like this. So I loved that story. That was the story. So long exposure landscapes create an artistic vision through visualization. And what I mean by that is that you have to sort of predict what will happen. So you have an idea about a subject, but you're going to convey what happens over time. So that's what I love about long exposures we talked about it a little bit at night, but during the day, it's a little bit different. So you have to do a little bit of calculation as far as how to control the shot, but luckily there's an app for that. So you won't have to go to too much trouble. But if you master the art of controlling light, and it's absolutely amazing. You could do some really creative work. And we have the most beautiful clouds, I think, in the world. They're absolutely gorgeous. So this is a picture of my camera and the foundation kit that I like to use. So the filters that you see when I was talking about filters, how to control the light, what you see on the top left is a 15-stop neutral density filter. That is my most used filter for really those 4 to 6 minute shots. That's the filter I have on the lens. The one on the bottom is a 3-stop. So that's the one I might use during the day just to get that extend that shutter speed a bit for those waves. And you're all probably familiar with a graduated neutral density filter, which is in the middle, which is probably my least used filter, but I do carry that. And the one on the right is a reverse graduated neutral density filter. I don't want to get too bogged down in the technique, but you can see that the deepest part of that is where I'd put that on the horizon line. And I don't need the density to be at the top of the frame. I need the density at the middle, so it's not so blown out. So these are the tools that I use for that, for this type of shot. So this was this pier. So you all probably know this pier very, very well. Melbourne Beach is absolutely gorgeous. I was down on my way to South Florida and I saw these clouds, and I made a detour really quick to get here. So this is like a 5-minute exposure. So I could see these clouds exploding into the sky. And so rather than just freeze the action and have just the clouds as we normally see them, I wanted to convey a sense of time passing with these clouds. I like to call them wind painted clouds. So working with the idea of shooting over several minutes. Same kind of thing too. This is Iceland. This is Vesterhorn. Absolutely beautiful place to go if you ever have the opportunity. Iceland is beautiful. What was happening was to me, it was so interesting. The terrain is so rugged and angular. So I wanted to echo that with the clouds. So working with the idea of exposure over several minutes to create that stretch of clouds. This particular exposure was about 5.5 minutes, and working with that 15-stop neutral density filter. You saw that shot, so a little bit more about this was a 6-minute shot. So that was the idea, again, putting that 15-stop neutral density filter to control light to create a more expressive image. So working with that idea. You saw the Carhenge photos earlier. So this is the color version, but this is a long exposure. So what happens with that background, really, it allows the foreground to really pop. So the clouds are blurred. So the foreground is much more expressive. So I love to work with that particular idea. This was London. This is a footbridge, the Millennium Footbridge. Absolutely loved working with this idea of shooting. Knew that it was going to be black and white. So again, with your images, I think about letting the subject guide you as far as post-processing goes. You know, if it's sometimes taking away the color gives the image more power, more contrast. You can see the textures and patterns, which you can see through this image. But what was amazing about this shot were those two people in the middle stood there and talked for like over 5 minutes the whole time I was making the shot. And it was first I was like, oh, they're going to be my shot. But then it was like a cool thing. It's an interesting thing that they're there over that course of time to be able to shoot this. So this is a 5-minute shot. And they took a chat that long, which was so interesting to be able to do. There's some interesting piers where I live, some old, really old piers. This is in the Sanford area. And they're beautiful. You can't really reach them. They're just off the seawall, so you can't really get to them, but you can photograph them, which is so amazing. So I wait for clouds. So I'm about 30 minutes out. So if I see really interesting clouds, I will make a beeline for this area and shoot. Love, love, love the idea of working with this. So 5 minutes here. 5 minutes of working with this. So this was a little bit different. I like to experiment a lot with photography. So sometimes it's just the process of doing something, going through different ideas. So my idea for this shot was to shoot multiple exposures, long exposures, to combine the images. So then you have this explosion of color. So I really like the idea of working with that. And coming back, and we talked about time lapse. So I had shot a time lapse of this area. So it was really interesting to do. I loved the time lapse, but then I started thinking about what would happen if I took all those images and combined them, and I would come up with a totally different image. This is one image that represents the time lapse. So you can see all the different actions, individual actions of the cloud. So it becomes sort of artistic and fun to do. So I love that idea. Again, just working through, the different challenges of a familiar area, finding new ways to shoot. Long exposure during the evening. absolutely love to do this. So as you might have noticed, I'm up an hour before sunrise. I'm shooting all day, continue shooting at night. So I love working with that idea. But as the sun sets, that's that time where the light begins to get really, really interesting. So this is over in Naples. This area is really pretty to shoot. Love old docks, so all the birds there. It looks like a long exposure. Actually, it was, I would say it's on the short end of that, but you can see a little bit of the pattern of the waves, but not long enough to blur the birds. So I'm shooting at that same location in New York City. I love this particular shot. Area is just absolutely beautiful to shoot. So I go to New York. You saw all the time square pictures, which are really fun to shoot. But at night, I love to go to Brooklyn Bridge Pier Park and shoot from there. It's absolutely gorgeous. So I love the light, so you can see the city. So I'm working with the idea of shooting a long exposure. So what happens, as you've noticed during the long exposure, is that the water is smooth. So you have a very tranquil feeling about the water, and also colors. As you get deeper into the evening, the colors become so vibrant and rich. So I just love working with that idea. Narrowing the aperture for this beautiful little starburst that add sparkle and glamour to a city shot. So what was happening is I noticed that when I first started shooting, the lights from behind me, just like the little Art Deco lifeguard stands, began to illuminate the foreground. All these docks actually began to have a brighter, more contrast than earlier in the evening. So waiting was nice. So, and then working with that long exposure shot, again, it blurs the cloud action and creates a really expressive image. So this is 3 minutes. This particular shot, I needed it the 24-70. That was really the right tool for this particular shot. But 3 minutes smooth the action of that. So, and also the same location, working a little bit south of that. So getting a shot that conveys the sense of time passing. So as the water taxis would come by, shooting for several seconds to be able to capture that. So this is a 30-second, I find really between 8, 15, 30 seconds. If it gets too long, then you won't even see the action of the boat. So not too long. South Beach, a lot of fun to be able to do this. So this is a shot, getting the streaks of light from passing cars. So you can just practice this. This is a lot of fun to do. Use a wide angle lens, get all that incredible action. At the blue hour is, again, so vibrant. The colors, just a vibrant blue, rich blue, and you have these streaks of light. So it creates a more expressive image that's a little bit more fun, super colorful. So Moscow, same kind of effect. Blue hour, absolutely wonderful time to shoot in the rain. I love the reflections on the cobblestone. So getting the camera down low and shooting up, so to getting all the different colors and the vibrancy of this particular shot. Paris, this is so much fun to shoot. So the idea behind the shot was to tilt the camera, so you have a dynamic flow throughout the image. So sometimes it's easy to approach the subject and have it very static and everything's very squared off. So I'd love to mix it up a little bit. So I'll tilt the camera or choose a different angle. To me, that's very important. Shooting during the blue hour to get that expressive color, using a shutter speed that conveys a sense of motion with this windmill. That's another element of the shot. And then tilting the camera. So those are the things that I'm working on for the shot. I really wanted to talk about this. This is San Antonio. So if you go to the Riverwalk area, you'll see the water taxis, which are amazing to be able to photograph just during the blue hour. Then the light is balanced. If you wait too far into the evening, then you start to get really high contrasty images. So working with the light of the blue hour is absolutely the best. So in this case, I love the water taxis. I didn't want to freeze the action of the water taxis because that is more tense. That's not the idea I want to express. I wanted to work with the idea of conveying a sense, of course, of time passing. I love that element. So this is actually 3 shots. I think they're 4 or 5 seconds each. So combining them, so you have this flow, this beautiful flow of the water taxis. Really great way to expand your storytelling as far as when you're traveling. So you can see the 3 shots. They were 5 seconds each with the D4. Went back during the holidays, and this was so much fun to be able to do. It was everything so vibrant and lights and really fun to do, because the water taxis are decked out with all these holiday lights. So again, working with that same idea, but creating a much different story with the water taxis over time. This is Tower Bridge. It's one of my favorite bridges in London. It's really amazing to be able to shoot here. I used a wide angle lens, super wide angle lens, to be able to get the part of the tower, and then this yellow bus as it passed by. So I was really interested in again, conveying a sense of motion. It looks super, it looks like this is going really, really fast. It's actually just a fraction of a second. And the same thing here. And I promise you, I wasn't standing anywhere dangerous. It looks like they've actually reconfigured the intersection, because I think it might have been a little dangerous at one point. But this is the Flatiron Building, several second exposure to create a sense of time passing. So this action. So if you've been to New York, you hear the horns, all the yellow taxis and the cars, it's just so wild and vibrant. And there's so much energy, that is in New York City. So love the idea that that's the story that I wanted to be able to tell. When you saw the camera perched on the ledge earlier, this is one of the things that I was shooting. I pointed the camera down and actually created a time lapse of all the traffic. So all the cars, as they're moving through the intersection. So they are kind of looped to be able to see this. So just, again, it's another way to tell your story in working with the idea of showing how time is passing. This is one of my favorite places. This is in San Francisco. My flight got delayed and I had planned on being here like early afternoon so I could work into that evening light, but that didn't happen. So I rushed and ran to this pier. I just literally dropped everything off. And I was so upset that I missed all the great action. But what happened was really interesting. When I got there were no clouds. And I was thinking about ways to compose the shot. So I knew I wanted to use a wide angle lens because I wanted to capture a lot of this interesting textures and patterns of the rails and the chairs. And also needed to put that camera down at almost ground level to be able to give you that sense of being there, really low. And then as I was kind of working through the compositions, clouds just began to evolve and pass through the shot. So I was really excited to do this. So 30-second shots, so you can see the stretch of clouds. They were very, very fast moving. And the couple who I did say, can you stay still for 30 seconds? And they did. So I was able to get the shot. So I love the idea of working through that kind of a shot. So here's the specs on that 80 to 400 millimeter lens that I was using to be able to shoot the cable cars, 10 seconds to be able to convey that sense of motion. This was actually at Crystal Beach on the west coast of Florida. It's one of my favorite places to shoot. And just, again, this is more of a digital creation. So you really haven't seen any of my digital stuff, but this was an idea of extending the foreground. So this is me. So you can reach me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can reach me there. My email is debsandidge, or just askdeb@me.com. Happy to answer any of your questions. And again, I'm a Nikon ambassador. I write for Shutterbug, and you can follow me there at different locations. So I might have to ask you to, to stop the share. Oh, there we go. Let's see. Gordon, can you do that? It's my cursor.
I can.
My cursor is apparently
at the bottom of your screen. You should be a little red stop sharing, but I will do this.
Oh,
so,
thank you.
Poof.
Yes.
Poof. You're back to just the rest of us here. So
okay, great. Yeah, for some reason the screen share, the web cursor was not working.
Well, I'll start out because I know there's a number of questions and comments people were putting in the chat, and Richard was kind of gathering them up and consolidating.
I gathered them.
But the one question I had, and I was pretty interested in your pictures that were 6-minute exposures and whatnot down in Miami Beach, with the lifeguard stations, and I looked closely at the pictures, and the sand was perfectly tan, the perfect color of sand. And I thought, that's got to be lit up by all these different neons. And my question was, in post-processing, did you tinker with color temperature to make the sand perfect, the right color, and thus making the lighthouse or the lifeguard stands correct? Or is that you just lucked into it and then it just came out that way?
Oh, I love that. No, generally, images need to be nudged in certain areas. So I always look critically at the shot, like what works, what doesn't work, and what can be improved. So, and I tend to shoot very neutral. So I'm not like shooting in vivid mode or, that kind of thing. So if there's any corrections that I need to make, I'll often use like a radial filter to, sometimes there's an area that's too bright and I'll bring that down, or an area that needs to be lit up, that kind of thing. So I'll balance the image through the corrections and post. That's a good question.
And the other question I had, and the one image that was in my introductory slides there, where you took the picture, I can't remember the tower, but it was along the bench, through the bench. You put your camera on the bench and the tower was in the background there. Do you use focus stacking? Do you ever use focus stacking, or do you just rely on a very closed down aperture for your depth of field?
That's a great question. That was a Transamerica building in San Francisco. Yeah. And yes, I did use focus stacking. That is a very helpful tool to be able to get an image that has a good depth of field. So again, you can choose, obviously, if you've done this before, you can choose how many images you want to work with, but it's very simplified now, I think, in the cameras that are newer. It's a much easier process.
And are you mostly, I assume that you use some Photoshop, but are you mostly Lightroom for most of your processing?
Another great question. Actually, I don't. So I use two applications. So I use an application, it's called NX Studio, which is designed for Nikon cameras. So I will use that. And I'll also use Photoshop. So those are the primary. The reason I tend to really like to use NX Studio is because the colors are so exactly true to exact what I shot, because I work hard to get those colors to be the best they can be. So you can use color profiles, and I'll do that often in Photoshop, but that's important to do. So those are the two applications that I use.
Okay, I'll get out of the way because there's a lot of other great questions, I'm sure.
Okay, great.
I have a question. I wanted to say I was impressed with few animal pictures, especially how you took a picture of an elephant and the set and the whole black and white concept. With the weather you saying about it. Like, how does it fit with black and white when you're taking pictures of things that make it better?
That's really an important question. So what happens with black and white? Well, I like to even think a little bit further back, like Ansel Adams would consider a color landscape and know how that translates to black and white. So he was looking at patterns and textures and shadow and light. So he knew how that was going to translate to a black and white image. And more contemporary photographers like you and I, we're thinking about, well, if I shoot this and convert it to black and white, it may make the image look more timeless and traditional. So you saw that Santiago, Cuba picture where it was black and white. So it really took away the contemporary part of the image. And with wildlife, again, it was the drama of the sky. So removing the color at that point allowed the emphasis to be on that beautiful elephant. So often I'll work with that. And if I work with infrared, then I'm primarily working with black and white automatically. I can do some color infrared, but I really prefer the traditional timeless look of black and white. Thank you.
To follow up on that question, that someone asked, do you shoot the black and white in the camera or do you do it post-production?
Okay, that's Interesting question. So with the color images, I'm shooting in color. With sometimes I'll use the black and white if I want to see what it looks like, because when you shoot in infrared, it's a little bit different. The tonalities are different, but with the newer cameras, it's pretty on task. So generally I'm shooting in color, and then I'll revisit that in black and white. Sometimes I just like to use one of the color profiles in the camera, like graphite or just some of the fun picture controls, and I'll shoot in that way. So a little bit of both, but for most, to have the most information, I'll shoot in color.
It's a good way to preview what you might get later on.
Yes.
I'll jump in with another question someone asked. With the fisheye lenses, do you use a tripod?
If I need to. So that's a good question. So with the fisheye lens, again, it's dependent on the light. So at night, I'll use something to stabilize the camera. I use tripods quite a bit, to be honest. So at night, for those really long exposures where I am not going to be able to handhold. Now, sometimes I can get away with positioning the camera up and being able to leverage some stability on the shot. And certainly we have that vibration reduction feature in the camera, which allows you to handhold a little bit more. But for I treat that fisheye just like any other lens. If it's dark enough, I need to use a tripod, I will.
Hey, Deb, I've got a question here, and it's a little more technical, but
okay.
Your tripod is what cued me to it. I shoot Canon, but I have a image stabilized lens and an image stabilized sensor, and I put it on the tripod, and I found that my images were soft. But when I turned off the image stabilization and took the picture from the tripod, they were razor sharp. So it's almost as if the image stabilization was working, trying to find something to correct, but it couldn't because it was on the tripod. Now I understand if it's windy out and blowing, you want to have it, but have you ever come across that or had to kind of not use it because it would make it blurry?
Oh, absolutely. You're exactly on target. So anytime the camera is on a tripod, I turn image stabilization off for that very reason that you said, because it's.
Uh-oh, I think we lost her.
Uh-oh.
Then I don't. If I'm in a car, and yeah, I heard uh-oh. So
yeah, we lost your audio for a second.
We lost you for about 6 seconds there.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, the storm is hopefully that'll work. But yes, so camera on the tripod, image stabilization, vibration reduction off, because you will lose that sharpness.
I don't know as if I've ever seen that published or written anywhere. And I mean, I dumb lucked into figuring it out. But that's something that ought to be as common sense and as well known as people use other components of the camera, because for that very reason.
I think it's in the owner's manual.
Yes, I think so.
Oh, is that thing I should have read when I bought the camera? Oh,
that one.
It's like the playground set you put together backwards and then read the directions.
Yes, I do that all the time. Absolutely.
I was going to ask, right? I did type it in the chat, but can you talk about your metering methodology for your long exposure images, especially as regards to long exposure images you do as the light is transitioning in the dawn or the evening hour?
That is I would say the most tricky time to shoot. So it's pretty easy to shoot when it's completely dark, because I know the exposure is going to be what it is. Transition times are difficult. You have to build that into the shot. So as I'm working at an hour before sunrise, so the time frame really starts to condense. So I have to accommodate for that. So that is a little tricky. And as soon as I get to obviously sunrise, then all bets are off. And then I might need to reach for those neutral density filters, as you were saying. So yes, I usually put the filters on the camera and then look at what the exposure will be. So when I'm making those long exposure shots. So I'm basing the exposure time off of a hypothetical shutter speed. So I'll make a test shot. Let's say it's 160th of a second, 160th of a second. So I know that probably, this is like another presentation because it's really long, but I know that that will give me the 3.5 to 4 minutes that I need to be able to shoot. So I'll put on any filters that I need to do before that. And that way my exposure is going to be exactly what is calculated.
Likewise, on your multiple exposure shots, are you underexposing so that the totality of light is where you need it to be?
No, that's a super question. So there's two approaches to that. So for the long exposure shot you saw at the Palouse with those wind turbines, the little ones that look like dandelions, that was there was probably about 8 shots in there and they were average. I set up the camera so it would average all those shots. So each one was underexposed, so to speak. So the final exposure was correct. For the double exposures, the self-portraits that you saw, I'm using a different blend mode in the camera, and that one is called add, and that doesn't average anything or take any, it just adds that next exposure on. So those two exposures are full value. So that's what makes that part so interesting. So it just depends on what you're doing and how you want that, which blend mode to use. So the camera, I think, automatically is set up to average. But if you want to experiment like with the self-portraiture, and you can do anything with that, you can do anything, woods, oceans, and anything could be that second image, but use the add blend mode and see what happens.
Okay.
There was another question that popped up in your bird photography. Do you use pre-focusing or do you use autofocus when you take your shots?
Good question. I'm using autofocus. So I pretty much know exactly relatively where that shot's going to be. So I'm focused very close, but those birds are going to move all over. You know, a couple inches is going to make a dramatic difference. So I'm relying on the camera autofocus system to be able to make those shots.
And does the Nikon system pre-focus on birds pretty well with their eyes and things?
Yes. So yes, you can definitely. So there's they have actually an animal eye detection, which is kind of neat. And the one that is so interesting to me with the people eye detection. So when I'm doing the self-portraits and I'm looking and I have the camera mounted on a tripod and I'm the subject, so I can't be behind the camera. So it's really strange. So I'm using the application called SnapBridge. And it will focus exactly on my eyes and lock on every single time. So then I can make the shot and it's exactly where it needs to be. So yes, the cameras are so amazing.
All right. Who else is out there with a question?
I have a question. A few years ago, I upgraded my camera and I asked this camera guy what I could do with my old camera. And he said to pay about $150 and get it converted to infrared.
Absolutely. That's a great idea. So what happens if you give your old camera new life? So now you have that other camera, which is generally going to be compatible with your existing lenses. So if you have one particular system, so I have Nikon. So I took one of my Nikon, I think it was like an 810 and had it converted. And so it was great. So I had all the lenses and then now I could shoot in infrared. So I love working with that idea. I use a company called Life Pixel, and you can Google them and they will tell you if that camera lends itself toward infrared conversion. And then you'll be given lots of choices on like what particular type of infrared conversion would you like. There's the standard 720 nanometer conversion. There is a a color version, a 590, there's hypercolors, there's all kinds of different infrared conversions, but that is a great way to broaden your horizons with photography, is to have an old camera converted to infrared. Great idea.
I have another question. For your long exposures, your 5-6 minute exposures, do you have to incorporate any kind of noise reduction into the image in camera?
I do. Absolutely. I have my camera set up for long exposure noise reduction just for that very reason, because I don't want to have to deal with it in post. And it's so that's another reason why I always carry two cameras. So one is exposing, that's a long time, that the camera's making a shot for 6 minutes and I don't have a really long attention space. So I'll let that camera be working and I'll use a second camera to be able to make different shots. But yes, I prefer it that way. I like the result. It's very clean, beautiful image, and I don't have to worry about the long exposure noise at all.
I have a question. Do you use the infrared remote to release the shutter?
That is a super question. I'm so glad you asked that. So yes, for any type of long exposure shot, there's the chance of getting that vibration as you press the shutter and it's creating a little motion in the pictures that will definitely cause images not to be sharp. I'm a big fan of the cable releases or remote releases. I can do it through my SnapBridge app on my camera if I wish. I like the cable releases. I'm kind of old school. So I have one that works with my Z cameras. So you'll see me always with this attachment to the cable shutter release. So I like to use that. The images will be sharp and crisp and you don't have to worry about it. It's just, that's one of those things you just don't want to have. You can't go back and, make it sharp. So you're getting it right the first time. So absolutely use that.
Great. I think I covered all the questions that were asked during the program. So.
Well, very good. If anybody has any questions, please let them, shoot an email to me. I'm super happy to respond. And I wish you the best with all the upcoming challenges. So hopefully there's a little takeaway that will help for that.
Well, I'd like to thank you for coming, Deborah. We really appreciate it. Literally every corner of the world, from Moscow to Europe to USA and everywhere in between. And you've got some really spectacular work there. So I'd like to thank you for coming on board and giving us a kind of a rundown, behind the scenes, if you will, on all the things that you do. You got some really terrific stuff. So on behalf of the club, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with your club. I enjoyed kind of virtually meeting you. I wish you the best with your photography. Thank you.
Well, next time you get the bug to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and come over and shoot a sunrise, just give me a call. I'll be glad to come out and you can have some company and show me some of your tricks too.
Super. Thank you.
All right.
Great.
Well, thanks everybody for coming and Zooming with us tonight. I know we had a terrific presentation and I know everybody's itching to get out of this COVID handcuffs. So pretty soon we will be there. And I'd like to thank Chuck, even though in absentia he's not here, for continuing with our virtual photo walks, because that keeps our head in the game. And that's a big part. So thanks everybody for that. And we'll see. You got till midnight tonight to get your motion shot taken and turned into Pat. So thanks everybody for coming.
Thanks, Deborah. I'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Gordy.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Signing off. Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, Pat and Peter.